movement lawyer, political commentator, and frequent rising guest, Olayemi Olurin, went viral last week after a heated debate with Mayor Eric Adams on policing and safety in the New York City subway. Olurin challenged Adams on the nearly $500 million NYPD has had to pay out for police conduct cases over the past 6 years, bringing back unconstitutional stop and frisk policies that infringe on individual freedoms, the choice to fund additional police and recruit armed guards for the New York subway, despite his admission that crime is down, and the 31 deaths that have occurred under his watch at Rikers Prison. Now, Eric Adams spoke on iHeartMedia's The Breakfast Club Friday morning about the safety in New York subways. Let's take a listen.
Our subway system is a safe system, and we put in additional 1,000 officers to do the high visibility, to deal with the reality, because safety is not only felt, it's perceived.
Now, Olayemi questioned Mayor Adams on this. Let's listen.
First of all, I would love to give me the quotes on my rhetoric, because I'm lost on that. Can you give me the quotes?
Oh, that you fairmonger about the subways?
Yeah,
you've consistently done that since the day one of your administration. One of the first things you did was add 1,000 officers to the subway because you claimed that the subways are unrideable. You and Hochul did this and said how dangerous it is, and you recently did that when you deployed the National Guard.
Sister, but that wasn't my question, Queen. My question was, what was my fear mongering? What did I say?
You continuously say, I could point to a number of videos and quotes and everything from you, but you've said repeatedly that the subways are dangerous.
Now, later in the radio interview, Olayemi Olurin argued that in addition to recognizing the death of NYPD officers like Jonathan Diller, Adams had declined to say anything about victims of police violence, including a 19-year-old Queens man who had been shot and killed the day before the interview. She also challenged him on bringing back stop and frisk policies. Let's listen to a little bit of that.
The federal monitor, who is tasked with ensuring that NYPD is following the law, conducted an analysis.
Came under who?
Conducted an analysis that happened 8 years ago, but they're still here monitoring what you're doing. And they said that you have brought back stop and frisk policies that are worse than they saw even during the Bloomberg era. But more importantly, they analyzed the neighborhood safe.
Show me that.
I could show you the report is available, and I know it's been available to you because your spokesperson has commented on it. They did an analysis of over 10 precincts,
you can't keep putting out
10
stuff
different
that's
precincts.
factual,
That is factual. There's a federal monitor reporting to Judge T. Swain on it and presenting the information. They said that, yes, listen, let me finish so you can peel it back. They conducted an analysis of 10 different precincts, and of the stops of 10 different precincts, they found that 97% of them, by the way, of the neighborhood safety teams that were disbanded in 2020 because of their disproportionate abuse against Black and Hispanic people that you revived, they analyzed 10 of those different neighborhood safety teams and found that they're conducting 97% of their stops on Black and brown people, and a quarter of them are unconstitutional. That's what the federal monitor said, not me.
Yeah.
Now, the conversation spilled over onto both print and social media as the New York NYPD Chief of Patrol Twitter account quote tweeted a viral clip of the interview saying, quote, "This movement lawyer epitomizes everything that true New Yorkers are against." And the New York Post ran a follow-up piece accusing Olay of being, quote, woke. Now, we're very pleased to be joined by this so-called woke movement lawyer and political commentator, Olayemi Olurin herself, to fact-check the claims and denials Mayor Adams made in that sensational interview. Welcome back, Olay.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, as always. Tell us a little bit about what the aftermath of this really viral exchange has been like.
I think it's been beautiful, honestly. I think it's been an overwhelming amount of support and people realizing a lot of what this administration has been doing that's been concealed from the public. There has been, of course, the NYPD harassment in the Post and the Fox News dropping their articles, but that is to be expected. I am not letting that bother me at all. But I do think it's worth mentioning that a lot of people are realizing that it says a lot that if NYPD, a journalist, is invited to an interview on a national platform, and because they don't like how the mayor performed, they begin attacking that journalist, and that the mayor is aware of it. The pressers pressed him on it in his, a lot of journalists pressed him on it in his presser yesterday, and he says that they are standing up, that he's not going to stop them from doing what they're doing. And it's not just me. They're also attacking a journalist named Harry Siegel, Errol Lewis, and Talia Levin. So, you know, but I'm not letting it get me down.
Yeah, let's dive a little bit into what you guys talked about during that interview. You, for example, got into a debate over Eric Adams' mention of Jonathan Diller's death. He was the NYPD officer who was killed during a traffic stop, but not talking about Black people who have been killed by the police. When we talk about this Diller case, this is an interesting one because I think this speaks to a lot of the concern that people do have about crime in New York City, is that it tends to come from a lot of repeat offenders. This individual had 14 arrests on his rap sheet, including attempted murder, grand larceny, and some other pretty serious crimes. And I think people look at cases like that and say, okay, we don't want our bags to be searched on the subway. We don't want the National Guardsmen on the subway. But we do think that people who have been arrested 14 times for quite serious charges probably shouldn't be out on the street. And perhaps incidences like Jonathan Diller's death could have been prevented. What say you?
I would say that wasn't the debate we were having. I would say that was a dog whistle that the mayor intentionally threw out so that that Fox and the Post and now the conversation that we're having could take place to distract from what the actual interview was about. More importantly, if you're going to have this attitude that people should not have their freedom or their constitutional rights should not be protected because one officer was killed, then what about the 7 people New York police officers have killed this year? Shouldn't we be having a conversation about the danger that police pose if we were just talking about numbers? Because surely more people have been killed by police than the other way around.
I mean, from your perspective, I wonder what you thought was the most surprising aspect of the interview. Because for me, honestly, Olay, I was surprised given what I know about you and the commentary that you've done about Mayor Adams. You've done a kind of a mini documentary on YouTube going through his entire career and what your criticisms of him are, that he would even be willing to sit in a room with you in the first place. How did that happen?
Me too. I was just as surprised as you, Regatta. I was just as surprised as you. The Breakfast Club reached out to me and they asked, well, Charlemagne and I had a conversation and he had asked me to come on the Breakfast Club. And I said, okay, yeah, sure. And then maybe like 2 days before the interview, it wasn't finalized yet. So the interview took place on Thursday. So about Tuesday, I was trying to finalize the interview and they said to me, oh, we're gonna have you in with the mayor. And I said, Mayor who? Eric Adams? And they said, yes. I said, never happen. That'll never happen. I said, yes, but it'll never happen. So I did not expect it to happen either. Even the morning of, I was there first. I was confident that was not happening. I was as surprised as all of you.
It definitely seemed like the mayor was not expecting how hard you were going to push him. I mean, you can kind of see him, his body language in these clips. He's turning away from you. He's kind of dismissive. He can't really look you in the eye. So I definitely found that to be quite interesting. And you all got into that debate over whether or not he's brought back stop and frisk type policies. I know since the interview, you've released some of the articles that you were referencing in an attempt to fact check Mayor Adams. For our viewers, can you break down what exactly the claims are about stop and frisk?
Yeah, it's undisputed that stop and frisk is back. The only reason they just go out of their way to conceal that from the public. There is a federal monitor. Rikers and NYPD have a federal monitor that is tasked with reporting on them regularly to a judge because stop and frisk was ruled unconstitutional in 2013 after they found that it was disproportionately used to abuse and police Black and brown New Yorkers, right? So that was found unconstitutional. And then Rikers has had records amounts of deaths every year. So there's a federal monitor that regularly takes these analysis and these reports and submits them. The federal monitor found that since Eric Adams became mayor, that they've revived stop and frisk. So the first thing was they had disbanded these units in the NYPD in 2020 that they found disproportionately abused Black and brown New Yorkers. Eric Adams brought them back. He revived these units that were disbanded for their abuse against Black and brown people and named them something different. And now those units have been they've conducted over 15,000 stops. This has been analyzed over 10 different precincts. 15,000 stops, 97% of them have been on Black and brown New Yorkers. More importantly, very few of those stops have yielded any results, have not found any guns, any contraband, or have done nothing to address this crime problem that he's saying. So they're just bringing back stop and frisk. And then they found that at least 1/4 of the stops altogether are completely unconstitutional. So I just wanted to bring that to his attention because it was conflicting with his rhetoric, right? I wasn't so much trying to attack him or push back on him aggressively. It was just that what he was saying was inconsistent. Any New Yorker knows that Mayor Adams is the main person constantly talking to us about crime in the subways, New York City, crime is out of control. So it was shocking to me to hear him say that New York City is the safest big city and our subways are so safe because that's inconsistent with what we've been told is necessary. And I thought it was interesting that he said that there is only 6 felonies happening in the subways a day, which is very different than what they tell us about the crime in the subways, but that they needed to hire, with our tax dollars, they needed to hire 2,000 new cops to be in the subways that he claims are safe, just so people could feel safer based on the visibility of police. So I was just pushing back on the obvious inconsistencies with what he was saying. On one hand, he's telling us that New York City is the safest big city. On the other hand, he's telling us that crime is out of control. So which is it, really?
Yeah, I agree that is an inconsistency. And I just wanted to go back for 1 second to your answer on the Officer Diller case. You said that it was a dog whistle, and I wanted to get some clarification on what you meant by that, because you did say it's a single incident. It maybe shouldn't inform all of our policy, but it is sort of exemplary of some of the issues that big cities have been having, which is a majority of violent crime is committed by people who are repeat offenders. And it seems like the rap sheets are longer and longer when we implement some of these criminal justice reform policies like bail reform, getting rid of mandatory minimums, getting rid of 3 strikes laws, et cetera. And so I do think it's a worthwhile conversation to say, if this officer's death could have been prevented by making sure that someone who has 14 charges, including attempted murder conviction, is not out on the streets to commit crime again. I mean, that doesn't sound like a dog whistle to me, but perhaps just providing an example of something that was a tragic case that is maybe instructive of policy discussions that we should be having about crime.
If that strikes you as something that we need to be talking about, if I tell you that a 19-year-old was killed by NYPD the night before, a 19-year-old who called the police himself for help and was then shot and killed, why is that not the discussion that we are having? When there were 1,273 people killed.
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
That's primarily my point. And when I said it was a dog whistle, it was a dog whistle because that isn't what we were talking about. What Mayor Adams then proceeded to say was, I don't want to take you out of context. So he knows that that isn't what I said. And then he proceeded to take me out of context so that they could feed a narrative to the Post and Fox News, who then proceeded to say that's what the interview was about. And that's where the interview went off the rails. And that is not so. So that we can now be having a conversation that has now switched to focusing on the NYPD or focusing on one officer rather than the thousands of New Yorkers, I'm telling you, are being are being criminalized, that who are having their rights violated and who are killed by police every year. That is my point. That is what makes it a dog whistle, because we've now switched the focus from the New Yorkers and the constituents he's supposed to represent and protect and moved to one officer.
So I appreciate that. I think you're completely right about how it played out in the context of the interview, and that Eric Adams seemed to be defensively raising that case to deflect from having the conversation about the police misconduct. And as someone who was a former police officer and who is responsible for the behavior of police officers, obviously none of us are responsible for the behavior of some random person who happens to break the law and in this case kill an officer. But I am curious how you respond, because I do recall you responding a little bit to this in a way that was useful during the interview, to the perception that those kinds of instances, that there are an outsized number of instances of violence happening because of progressive policies like bail reform. And perhaps you can give us a little bit of context about what's going on the other side of things in Rikers at the same time, which is, of course, a pretrial detention center.
Yeah, well, listen, there's the vast majority of crime, or the vast majority of criminal charges in the U.S. criminal system across the board, but specifically in New York City, are misdemeanors in the first place. They're either misdemeanors, traffic offenses, or non-criminal infractions. And the majority of what is charged as felonies, over 90% of everything charged as felonies in New York City, ends in a dismissal, acquittal, a misdemeanor conviction, or some other non-criminal conviction. So that's first and foremost. It makes up a very tiny percentage of what's happening in our criminal system, violent crime. More importantly, as it pertains to bail reform, and this has been analyzed by the Brennan Report, by the Comptroller, by the Federal Monitor, it is, and you can use a website called factsnotfair.org that I encourage everybody to check out. But very little, less than 2% of anybody that is let out without bail is rearrested for violent crime. This makes up a very tiny amount of crime, and it is sensationalized by the news, which by Eric Adams' own admission, he said the media is who is sensationalizing this crime. Mind you, it's him. He's a part of the media, the Post and all of these places, and NYPD's own Twitter accounts. But this makes up a very, very, very tiny portion of what happens. More importantly, when we talk about gun violence, even during that interview, Mayor Adams said when he started to fearmonger about crime again, he said, oh, we don't want people, having guns, committing gun crime and getting out the next day. That is completely untrue. The gun possession in New York City is considered a violent crime. Gun possession is not bail eligible. You will be remanded. There is nobody committing gun crime or having a gun and getting out the next day. That's not happening. But more importantly, when we talk about people who have rap sheets, when we talk about people having long criminal rap sheets, it's interesting to me that these things are presented as though they are failures on the left or the progressives or something that we have to explain. But I want to make it clear, I'm not the mayor and I'm not in politics. None of my policy wants, or the leftist world I want to see is what we currently live in. New York City has a cop for a mayor. We have the largest police department in the country. We've given them more and more money. We've expanded this. So these things are failures. If we feel like the criminal system that you are employing against the poor people with mental health issues, if we're employing the criminal system against them and we are finding that that is not helpful, that is not doing anything to stop crime, surely that is a failure on policing and the criminal system that we have, and not for me to explain. Instead, we should talk about the fact that the criminal system and violating people's constitutional rights does nothing to actually address the root causes or prevent crime from happening again. Because if you were just criminalizing the same populations repeatedly and repeatedly and repeatedly, what's that going to do? You're not going to be able to just take everybody and put them in jail for the rest of their lives, unless that's the argument. And also, I think it's very dangerous the way that we talk about bail. Cash bail, the bail system is not about people who've been convicted. These are people who are accused of a crime. You cannot simultaneously say people are innocent until proven guilty and then actively be trying to weaponize a cash bail system against only poor people who are accused of crimes.
Excellent points. People can find more and hear more of these arguments that you're making over on your several YouTube shows. I highly recommend them. Olayemi, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.